Hello everybody, welcome back to the Lucy Superfox Show. So we took a little break between season 1 and season 2. Actually, I thought it was like a few weeks and it turns out it was like 12. But I just needed a beat. I needed to take a minute in between, both from a seasonal perspective. I delivered a full year of work with clients, and I was like, right, what is it I want to talk about next? What is it I want to bring into season 2 of the Lucy Superfox Show? So currently on vacay in Dubai, and I have so much more emotional space and space to think when I'm not in my home environment, right? And I think sometimes we underestimate how much our home environment is actually not suffocating us, but keeping us small. And I know that for me personally, that's definitely something that I've experienced, is that absolutely love where we live, love our environment, but actually it's not fostering change because it's not disrupting me, right? Because we get so caught up in our routines, so caught up in our habits, that we don't actually realize that our routine is keeping us small and keeping us the same. And so I love changing my environment just because it helps me disrupt myself. It helps me know that actually I'm like, cool, we're doing different things for the next 5 days, and it creates that distance and space between walking the dogs and then doing the work, and it creates this element of room. And so I needed room. I needed that, and it's, fancy term is capacity. I needed emotional capacity and space to work out really what I wanted this podcast to be about. And I'll be totally honest, I really got in my head about it. I really have overthought it. I've been maybe I need to change the format, maybe I need to talk differently, and actually I think what I've done is tried to make this podcast something other than what it was originally intended to be. And what it was originally intended to be is a space for me to speak unfiltered about the things I know for sure, about what I trust in, about what I believe in, about what's going on for me in real life, and documenting those experiences. And obviously from time to time bringing on amazing people in my life and sharing messages that I align with or agree with, and sometimes don't agree with. But I think I got in my head about it, and I think it's so easy to get in your head about anything to do with your business and to do with your work when you care about it, right? You'll overanalyze, you'll question it, you'll overthink, because it really matters to you what the results are. And I think that often happens because we make the results mean something about us. And what I had to bitch slap myself the other day with was actually this was never about being results driven, because results driven energy is 100% hustle culture, which is obviously something I don't stand for. And actually the energy that I wanted to create this in was an energy of, actually allowing me to a funnel and a channel for me to just share how I really feel, regardless of the views, regardless of the hits, regardless of the interaction. That was never the goal, right? The goal wasn't provide a monetized platform. The goal was share a podcast of how you really feel about what's really going on that will really help some people who are in the same scenarios and same situations as you. And so I share that with you because I do think that a lot of women are in that space where they're analysing and questioning and overthinking the moves they're making in their business. And I know this because as my clients, I'm watching it happen in real time. I'm watching clients on a call come to me with a plan, and then when I ask questions, or I'm like, really, what makes you want to do that? Or why would that be the right move for you? That they, the instant places, they jump out of their body and into their head, into this space of, oh my God, is that right? Is that wrong? And so I guess the first message I really wanted to share today, and something that has been coming up a lot inside root cause therapy, is the fear of getting it wrong. We are so afraid to get it wrong and so attached to getting it right. And I think the way I've described it to clients is people often think about it as no, I just like to be right, because who wouldn't like to be right? And what that says to me is you're afraid to get it wrong. That you believe on an unconscious level that there is a massive consequence for getting it wrong. But getting it wrong is one part of growth, right? Growth and transformation. But two, that fear of getting it wrong, that's the good girl trauma. That's that need to perform, need to prove, need to please, need to show up in the world, need to be a certain type of person to be accepted, need to be a certain type of person to be safe, need to get results to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. The fear of getting it wrong is showing up all over with my clients, whether it's in their personal relationships, whether it's in their business. And I massively had this. I actually think this was the main driver of a lot of my hustle and performance, was the need to get it right, afraid to get it wrong, the need to be validated, need to be seen. And I think that this belief is one of those unconscious ones that so many women do not know they have, because they're so caught up in the perform, prove, please energy that they don't realize that actually this is what's running the show. Because why would we not want to receive recognition? Why would we not want to have great social media interaction? Why would we not want to make fucking loads of money and have loads of clients? Why would we not want that? And the answer is, of course, you know, it makes total sense. But the question, and this is the thing, the question is, what is the driving force? Because when you can build two completely different businesses, right? You can build a business based where the driving force is like joy, inspiration, alignment. And actually got a really lovely email this week from a client who's done that exact same thing. She burnt her business to the ground after being burnt out by hustle culture, and she completely started again. But she started again from the energy of like, I'm going to start from scratch, I'm going to get to know myself again. She's in the Goddess Code, which is my program for that. And she actually sent me an email saying it was so amazing to take on a client this week from the energy of alignment, trust, faith, like I can absolutely help this person and I can serve this person, versus I need to get 20 clients to hit my money goals. And so the driving force is what counts. And when underneath the driving force is, I'm afraid to get it wrong, right? You got like push-pull energy, right? So pull energy is like magnetism, it's alignment, it's like attraction, it's like joy, it's abundance. And then your push energy is pushing against. And the best way to describe this is like in a weight loss analogy, if you're pushing against the negative energy for your weight loss goal, you're going, my jeans don't fit. So that's your motivation to get going, right? Versus somebody who's going to probably make a long-lasting transformation is somebody that says, I want to get really fit and healthy, and they're on the other end with a body goal in mind, but also a health goal in mind, a feeling goal in mind, and they're being pulled towards their goal. But people who are in the push energy are pushing against something. They're pushing against the jeans don't fit. But the thing is, the second the jeans fit, that doesn't mean they're at their dream body or their big vision goal. It just means the jeans fit. And they end up sliding between this scale. And if you're listening rather than watching, I'm kind of waving my left hand from left to middle, is they end up just moving. And this is where the yo-yo comes from, right? The yo-yo diet, the yo-yo business goal, the yo-yo money income, this like that kind of feast and famine energy that you see show up in business, in body, in relationships, where it's all or nothing, all or nothing, all or nothing. And because it's always coming from a push energy, right? And actually the answer is, if we want to create like long-lasting transformation, it needs to be coming from that pull energy, that magnetism, that like big vision. And I think, and it doesn't have to be, and this is the thing, right? Big vision, everyone thinks they need to be a fucking millionaire. And that's not what a big vision means. A big vision means a transformation from where you are now. And so if your push energy is the fear of getting it wrong, or the fear of not being seen, or the fear of not being worthy, or not feeling good enough, which are the things that I see show up with clients in literally every single client who comes to me, those are some of them. And in fact, I'm going to talk loads in future episodes about the energy of safety and what the energy of safety really means inside your business, and what the energy of safety really means inside money, and what it really means inside a body transformation. But when we're pushing against, right, we're pushing against this negative energy, the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being seen, the fear of not being validated, we're never actually pulling ourselves towards that potential. We're always just pushing against a version of us that we don't like, but we're not actually designing and creating a version of us that we do like. And I think I even got in my head about bringing this podcast back and what that meant for the fear of getting it wrong. And I was like, well, what do you want? What do you want, Luz? Like, what do you want your business to look like? What do you want your podcast to look like? And what I want it to be is an unfiltered space where people get to say how they really feel. Because for so much of my life, I felt like I had to toe the party line. I felt like I had to modify myself and fit myself in boxes. Like recently I had a conversation with someone and they were like, you've got opinions on politics. I was like, yeah, I just never felt safe to express them. And I think this is where the foundations of safety, from a nervous system perspective, from an emotional perspective, from an identity perspective, they hold so much more weight than you think they do. And I think that it's like, you know, trending right now to do nervous system regulation. And I'm here for it. I'm here for supportive and positive trends. But at the same time, I think it's remembering that safety isn't a gimmick. Safety is something that we create inside of ourselves when we like who we are, when we know who we are, when we can trust ourselves, when our body and our mind are, you know, singing this from the same hymn sheet. But that can only happen through doing the deep work. That can only happen through doing the deep healing work, that it's safe to be seen, it's safe to relax, it's safe to be good enough, that you believe you're worthy, that you love yourself. And so there are so many women chasing like what I call like the icing layer of personal development. But I promise you that underneath the icing layer is the foundations of an incredible cake. But you have to be willing to mix all the ingredients, right? I'm rolling with this metaphor. You have to be willing to get into, you know, like I'm a sensory person, and so like the idea of like mixing a cake batter with my hands makes me go like, what? But that's kind of it. You've got to get into the down and dirty to clear out all these root cause beliefs that are showing up for you unconsciously. And so what this podcast did was really mirror back to me where there was still work for me to do, on where I felt like I had to be successful. And the truth was, and you know, I don't mind sharing this, I've probably been successful at every single thing I've ever done. And that's because it wasn't safe to be unsuccessful. It wasn't safe to not be the best. It wasn't safe to not be, you know, recognized and validated. Like, I have been a performer and a prover and a pleaser my whole life until about 3 years ago, we'll push into the 3-year mark, when I started to allow myself just to be where I am. And that's what I had to remind myself with this podcast, right? And lessons always do a full circle until you fully learn them, and I've really seen that, especially with money. That's been a hot topic. Maybe we'll segue into that in a sec, but the key is that I got to relearn this lesson all over again, that it wasn't about having anything to prove or performing or pleasing or needing to get anyone else's validation on this podcast, and that actually I was enough and it was enough, and that whatever I came here to share, as long as it was coming from the heart, was absolutely the right thing for this podcast. So my advice would be, and it's the advice I've given to clients literally 100 times in the last month, is, and something whenever I give advice to clients, I literally sit there in session and I'm like, yep, you're hearing this, Luce? Start where you are. Because if where you are is somewhere you don't like and you're trying to avoid it, I totally get it. You want to jump ahead. You want to jump out of your body and into your big vision life. You want to jump out of reality and into a future concept and ideal, and call it visualization and manifestation. And actually what it is escapism. And that makes it no different from binge watching television, like, you know, watching Sex and the City and believing you live in New York and wear fancy clothes. It's the same as going on holiday and having a blowout and a bender. Like, it's not reality. And look, I am the biggest advocate for redesigning and creating your reality. Like, you know, I always say to my husband that if I hadn't married him, I'd have tried to marry Joe Dispenza. And because I truly believe that we have unlimited potential to create whatever reality we desire. But you can only do that when you accept where you actually are. When you accept the truth of what is actually happening in your life. And so when you're trying to jump ahead into this like big ideal or big concept of what your life could be, you're actually denying how you really feel. You're denying what's really going on for you, what lessons and what growth you really need to witness. And so that's what I had to do. I had to start where I was with the podcast. Not in the podcast potential, not in my potential, because potential is, you know, unlimited. But actually I had to sit with, this is where it is right now. This is what it is right now. This is the viewership right now. This is the thematics of it right now. This is how you feel about it right now. And look, that's why I took a break, because taking a break is fucking so healthy. But actually what I was able to witness and recognize is that nothing's actually changed between when I stopped recording season 1 and when I've started recording this one, because I wasn't changing. I was still looking at it through the same lens. And so I had to sit there and really challenge myself and question myself and say, what different lens do you want to see it through? Because you can keep seeing it through the eyes of its potential and then getting frustrated when it doesn't meet that potential, right? Or you can actually see it through the lens of where it actually is and be in acceptance, and not in joy, not necessarily in gratitude, but be in acceptance of where it currently is. Because as the famous quote goes, and I think off the top of my head it's Carl Jung, we can edit, if it's not, I'll edit in the description here who it actually is the moment one truly accepts oneself, then one can change. Because whilst we're avoiding parts of ourselves or versions of ourselves or areas of our life, while we're avoiding it and living in its potential and living in its vision and living in its possibility, we're actually denying the truth of how we really feel, the truth of our nervous system, the truth of our belief system, the reality of our life. And when we deny something, we're always escaping it. But when we accept it, when we can bring ourselves to actually sit with where it currently is and accept where it currently is, from there, anything is possible. Because in acceptance is healing. In acceptance might be grief. There might be the reality that you're not where you think you should be by now. But then through that grief, through that opportunity to really witness yourself where you actually are, from that point, then anything is possible. Because then you're building not from pushing against something, or creating not from pushing against something, but moving towards something that feels really good. And throughout the journey, then you call yourself back to the lessons and go, oh, that's interesting, that trigger's come up for me again. What work do I need to do on that? Oh, actually right now that feels like, whoa, that doesn't feel like a comfort zone thing. That feels like a safety zone thing. And a quick side note for anyone who doesn't know the difference, a comfort zone is, oh, that would be exciting, oh my gosh, right? And then a safety zone thing is, oh my God, that's terrifying. Safety zones need to be healed and dealt with at a root cause. Comfort zones need to be stretched and challenged. So for me now, with this pod and with, you know, this YouTube and whatever else you want to call it, I call it a podcast because I'm from that generation, right? I'm not a YouTuber. I would love to see more views, I'd love to see more visibility, but you know what? I'm starting where I am, and I'm accepting that where I am is enough. And that actually maybe the purpose of these podcasts wasn't to go viral, wasn't to be in its potential, right? But was actually to be a resource of documenting in real time what I was knowing, what I was believing, what I was seeing, what I was witnessing, what I was embodying, and then paying that forward to clients as a resource and a tool to use throughout their journey. Because the number of podcasts that I recommend to clients that are 18 months old, a year old right now, is unbelievable. And they're like, oh, that was so supportive, thank you so much. But whilst I'm attached to an outside possibility or potential without really truly accepting where I am, nothing's going to really change, right? And so accepting where you are is the first step. And so this is really the energy and message of this first podcast or this first video back, is there's nothing to prove. There's nothing to prove to anybody. And maybe the journal prompt to ask yourself is, what if there was nothing to prove? What if there was nothing to perform on? What if there was nothing to shift into? What if there was nothing to achieve? What if there was nothing to prove? What would I do next? Because if there was nothing for me to prove for this podcast, what I would do next is continue just to share from the heart what's coming up for me, what's coming up for my clients, and hope that the people that feel so lost and so undirected and so unsure and that are questioning themselves behind closed doors, because if you are who I think you are, which is a high-performing woman with massive ambition who knows that possibility and potential, but behind the scenes you ruminate, you overthink, you doubt yourself, or you mask all of that with high performance or with escapist behaviours, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is for the women who don't feel safe to unmask themselves, who don't feel safe to say, I'm fucking struggling, or who don't feel safe to say, I think I'm burnt out, but I'm scared to admit it. Or the women who say, do you know what? I feel like I have so much to prove and I have no idea who I am. And so if that is you, then I have just been embracing that journey for the past 5 years of my entrepreneurial journey. And I want you to know that you can still be successful. You can still be healthy. You can still be wealthy. You can still be deeply in a loving, committed relationship with yourself and with another. But only when you're willing to do the deep work, when you're willing to accept yourself exactly as you are, and then you can change. So that was it for this episode, and I would love for you to like, subscribe, to share with anyone you feel might resonate, and I'll see you on the next one.